Since you quit your $800,000 job at Meta,
The job might be taken over by AI. I actually am quite confident that'll happen. DSA, like leak code problems, will I think become less important as a measure of engineers' quality. But I'm very confident that in the next 5 to 10 years, engineers are going to have tons of opportunities. And
how did you convince YC and how did you get accepted? So hello everyone, today we have Rahul here. He had an incredible journey studying at Stanford and then joining a startup, then that got acquired, then joining Meta, and then creating his own startup which got accepted in YC, that also B2C business. It's really hard to get accepted to YC for your startup journey, especially for a B2C startup because they prioritize B2B. First of all, I'll let you introduce yourself and let's get to learn.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming down here. I'm happy to meet you after following your content for so long. I'm Rahul, in the Bay Area. I went to Stanford, did a startup, got acquired, went to Pinterest. I worked at Meta after that, and then in 2022, I left Meta to start Taro, which got acquired, or not acquired, but got accepted into YC. So we went through YC in the summer 22 batch, so 2 years ago. It's been a great journey so far for the past 2 years.
Awesome. First of all, since you quit your $800,000 job at Meta, I really want to know your relationship with money. What do you think? How difficult was it to quit that $800,000 job at Meta to do your own venture? And what relationship with money you have right now since you have spent so much time in Bay Area?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I feel like that, the YouTube video I made about making 800K really blew up. So I've got a lot of questions about this. I think that a couple things. One is that I think the marginal value of money goes down over time. And so if you, like when I graduated, I didn't have much money. And so the first job I had, it paid $110,000, which is a ton of money. I mean, even now it's a ton of money. But then once I started to accumulate more, eventually I had a net worth of more than $1 million. And so getting an additional 100K if I worked for an additional year didn't mean as much to me compared to in year one when I graduated. And so by the time I had made 800K, at that point, through the appreciation of Meta stock and also the stock market doing well for my other assets, I was comfortable. Like I wasn't like F you rich, but I felt like, okay, I had enough that I didn't need to work for a year, 2, 3 years maybe. And so part of it was, okay, I feel like I had security in that way. And I think the thing about big tech versus startup is that you will make great income all the time. I felt like I could go back to that. And the thing is that you can't get an outlier outcome in big tech, meaning that you could make a ton of money, like $1 million a year even. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to make 10 million in big tech. The only way you could ever make that much money is if you go and do a startup which has a huge outcome. And it might not succeed. Who knows what will happen with Taro? But I'm happy to at least try it out and see what happens.
What would you define as like a safe income to have before getting into your own venture in Bay Area? Is it $1 million, 5 million? Before you can think that, you have like a plan B?
I think there are two parts to it. One is like a one-way door versus two-way door, which you might have heard that concept. The idea is that if you leave the job, how easy is it for you to come back? And I felt like just through, frankly, my own confidence of like, okay, I feel like I have enough fundamental skills in building apps and like technology that even if I completely fail, I can come back to it. So it didn't ever feel like a risk in that way of like, okay, I'm going to lose all my money. That's part of it. The other part of it, I don't think I keyed in so much on the income, although high income is good, but it was more on your net worth. Right? Because if you have a large net worth, that itself can create more wealth, create more income. And so I think both of those were true for me. I felt like I had a high enough net worth that was generating income for me passively. And also I felt like no matter what, if I fail at Taro, as long as I continue to learn and I keep my skills sharp, I felt confident I could go back and get a big tech job if I wanted it.
In other words, the decision was reversible. If you can reverse that decision, you should like take it immediately. That's how fast you did it.
Yeah.
So you only thought about growth. You didn't think about like, it's a risky decision at all, right?
Yeah, and I think I will say like it's kind of a privileged place to be. Like I didn't have a visa issue. I'm a U.S. citizen. Like there was no concern for me of like I'll get kicked out of the country or, I think in some other places or societies, it's like, oh, it's a status thing of like, oh, you left your big job and now you're doing something worthless. Like I never had any of that. So I'm really happy to be here in the Bay Area where I felt like I had that security and kind of ability to take that risk.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about your journey in terms of pivoting careers, because since you have switched jobs so many times, you have switched from Pinterest to Meta. At one point of time, was it the career growth or was it financial decisions that made you move companies and move even technical careers. For example, you were working in AI, then you moved to Kotlin. You started doing Android development, and I'm a big fan of all the Android videos you did because I started my career as Android developer, and 3 years ago I saw your channel. So what made you pivot every 2 years?
I think a lot of it was based off of, I would say two things. Number one is the people, right? I felt like a big part of why I went into Android was that there was someone at Pinterest who I really respected, who I felt like could actually give me the time of day. Like, I think there were a lot of also smart people there in like AI, ML, and the AI was even back then quite hot. But I just felt like my ability to get mentorship and learning would have been a little bit harder in that domain compared to Android. So I felt like that was a big part of it. And the second part of it is, what is the need for the company? I think if you orient yourself with whatever is the highest priority objective of your team or of your company, you will always be able to benefit from that because it's going to be more people, more attention, more money going into whatever it is that that company cares about. So I think if you kind of follow the people and follow the impact of like what people care about, I think you're going to be set up for career success.
I think that comes down to the principle that we should be more good of a listener than action creator. Let's say we are doing action without listening what the problem is. That's where people fail. They don't want to ask manager that, I'm doing this way, is that okay? That's what they ask. But instead of that, they should ask, what are the problems that can increase my impact? What problems the team is facing? Just open-mindedly ask that.
Yeah. I think actually on Taro, we talk about that a lot in that I think a bad way to think about career growth is, hey, manager, I would love to get promoted. What can I do? Right? That's actually a very, very bad way to phrase your like growth plan. If you instead do it the way you talked about, which is, hey, I'm really eager to make a big impact at the company. And here's my opinion about the top 2 or 3 things I could possibly work on that could really help the team exceed its goals. I would love your feedback on how I could spend my time appropriately to both help the team and also help my career. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. Listener and open to listen to problems. That's the most important thing that is missing, and I think that's need to be possible. Just like how inspiring is the journey of Rahul, it is also of the app called Moomoo, which started from Palo Alto, California as well, and has reached almost 23 million users. And I use it every single time I look at the market trends, or if I have to look at China and Hong Kong's market, because there are rarely stock brokerages apps in America like Moomoo which allow you to invest in Hong Kong's or China's stock market and look at the level 2 data with that much information. And just like 62% of Americans in the US who have a stock brokerage account, you can be one of them. It's completely legal on F1, H1B visa, and get started immediately by going to start.moomoo.com/SingInUSA and get up to 15 free stocks and 8.1% APY. Go start right away. Now, since you brought up Join Taro, that's your YC venture right now. So how did you make it to YC being a B2C company? Because B2C problem is that if competition comes, a consumer can switch instantly, especially when it's a website. I switched so many apps that fast.
Yeah.
How did you convince YC and how did you get accepted?
Yeah, so I think it was tough. I would say we applied to YC twice. The first time we got rejected. Second time we got in. I think both the things you called out, there are 2 reasons why B2C is harder. One is what you said. Switching cost is so easy. It's easy to go from one dating app to the other dating app. There's not that much lock-in. The second is that consumers typically don't pay that much, right? The ACV, average customer value, for a consumer company is actually quite low. And so I think we knew that and YC knew that, which is why they rejected us. I think the reason why we got in the second time was because, honestly, it was a bet on us as founders. I think one of the things that people may not realize about YC is that they care about the idea. Obviously, they care about your traction. But equally, or maybe even more importantly, they also think a lot about, okay, who are the people behind the company? Is there a belief? Does YC believe that if you work hard enough and you have an appetite to learn, you can navigate your way from a 5 out of 10 idea into a 10 out of 10 idea because you're learning and getting feedback from users? And so I think at the point that we got into YC, I think we had, I would say, 4 out of 10 traction, 6 out of 10 articulation of the idea. But I think they really cared a lot more. Oh, we were 9 out of 10 founders, right? It seems like you have a track record of learning and success. And that was a bigger reason why they invested, rather than, we think that B2C education could become big. That's actually a really hard thing to make big, right?
So convincing them, what it took the most? Was it the numbers? Was it your energy? Because I think like currently there's a big market, if you don't know, on Fiverr. People are willing to pay people on Fiverr just to make some numbers for B2B and get accepted and get some funding.
Oh, wow.
And that's a big industry. You pay
Okay.
500, 200 to Fiverr people. They're okay. Just give them the idea. They will just make the numbers and help you convince the investor.
Yeah.
So what it takes is the numbers or your willpower or like, you know, you just showed your background and history.
Yeah, I think it's mostly the latter. I think a big thing that I think about a lot when I talk to a startup founder, and I think what YC cares about too, is what is your level of insight on the customer problem? Or like how deeply ingrained are you in the community? So even like for, I would say, a year and a half prior to us even incorporating Taro, my co-founder and I, we had been doing these like weekly webinars where we'd have like 400 or 500 people show up talking about career growth. And we had our like a private community before Taro with 10, 20,000 people who were talking about career growth. So I felt like when we came into the interview, I think it was very obvious that we had a very good understanding of what engineers cared about with career growth. We were engineers ourselves, and we had a track record of showing, hey, we've done this before. We know more about this than almost anyone else in the Bay Area or maybe even the world. And I think that was a big confidence booster. I think more importantly than like TAM, like how big could this get? Because frankly, I don't think the TAM is actually huge.
What's TAM?
TAM is total addressable market. Like how big could this opportunity get if you like multiply out the average customer value times the number of customers times the whole, you know, like the market cap basically. So like I think consumer education is actually not that big. But I think in terms of our ability to understand what people needed and YC's ability or YC's belief that we could navigate the idea into something bigger, that was probably the reason why we got in.
Excellent. So you use the strategy called showing yourself as a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
So I think that is an excellent way because I think there's a big relationship between Stanford grads cracking YC and, you know, at a rate of highest in the world. So what is that relationship you see?
Well, I think part of that is just purely social in the sense that like, if I know a lot of people around me who are like, I don't know, like they make clay pots. There's a good chance I'll go and make clay pots too, right? So I feel part of it is that at YC there's like a culture of entrepreneurship. So even before we'd gotten in, there were probably dozens of people I knew who got in. So that was like, it's kind of in the air. I think another part of it too is that, you get feedback a lot more easily, right? Like I probably got my YC application reviewed by 5-10 people who also then recommended us. So I think that helped. And again, I think we talked about this maybe off camera too, which is like, I think the culture in the Bay Area or in Silicon Valley is a lot more accepting of leaving your fancy job with a high paycheck. And it's actually respectable to go and do something which is like, there are no users, there's no revenue. Whereas I think maybe, you know, my parents, they were born in India. I think you're from India. So it's like, I think in India it might be a little harder. Other places might be harder to make that jump. So I think all of those ingredients make it so that the Bay Area, Stanford in particular, is a really good breeding ground for future entrepreneurs.
Now, let's talk about the future because the job market is changing, but the hiring process hasn't. Like I talk to top AI engineers, even at like Applied Intuition who work on autopilot. All of them are tested on data structures and algorithms, even right now. Do you think that it is changing or it has to stay the same so that it's a level ground for the top talent to be hired in big tech and startups?
Yeah, I think tech hiring is very imperfect. I think that if you talk to any engineer, they'll tell you pretty clearly, right, that the DSA, leak code style questions where you're like reversing a linked list, it is so far removed from what you actually do on the job. So I think it's very clearly imperfect, but I also think that there's a reason why companies are using this evaluation process. And there is some signal. It might not be the most efficient way to get that signal, but it's still valuable because when I'm asking you a question about DSA, I'm not just testing your ability to solve that problem. I'm also testing like, how well do we work together? Are you able to communicate your idea effectively? And I do think with a lot of AI technology these days, especially with like, as AI becomes better and better with reasoning and programming, I think that the importance of DSA, like these leak code problems, will actually decrease and it'll be more focused on decomposing a problem, working with other people. And because of that, the evaluation process, the interview process will have to adapt and change because of that. I actually think we're at the beginning of a very interesting time of seeing that change. But yeah, it's kind of been like a very imperfect interview period or interview evaluation time for companies in the past few years.
I think there's some value to it, so it might not change, and it's hard to test and try because it can cost. They don't want to miss out on the best engineers that they are able to get with this process.
Yeah.
And bad engineers is most costly than one good engineer.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a bad engineer getting hired can really bring down the morale of the team and like actually make, not just to be a neutral, like have zero contribution, there might be a negative contribution because now the other engineers around them have to fix the code. So either from a bad technical hire or just a bad culture fit where they like make people around them upset, it can be really costly to have someone who's not a good fit, which is why companies care a lot about that evaluation process, even if imperfect.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about Join Taro. So you have more than 15% users in India and so many in the US. It's a big market. People want to grow in their career. So what do you think is the best way for students watching to use Join Taro to grow in their career?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it, a big part of Taro is we have a course platform. And so we have almost more than 30 courses now, which are really expertly crafted to figure out how can you improve dramatically in one element of your career, whether that's promotion or managing up or finding a new job, doing a system design interview, things like that. And so the way I think about it is we focus a lot of our time, most of my time goes into how do we get the best people in the world to create the content on Taro. And so like most people watching, like even for me at Stanford, I never had the ability to interact with like a director of engineering at Google or Meta. I never had the ability to interact with a VP. So what we're doing with Taro, trying to get the actual insights and tools and ideas from a VP at Amazon, for example, and package it up on Taro. So I think a big part of it is like, how can you accelerate your learning and the amount of insights you get by watching and learning from people like that? Another big part of Taro is a discussion forum. I think engineering, no matter how much we try and make it a solo activity, it is social. Like the way you create anything meaningful and the way you grow in your career is through collaboration. You talk to people, you interact with them, you figure out how you can learn, how you can benefit them. And so I think a big part of Taro on top of the course platform is a community layer, which is you talk to people, you get feedback, you try and help people. And I think if you do both of those things, you're going to be much, much better off compared to someone who's not on Taro.
And to build that platform, it takes a lot of networking skills. Like you are reaching out to, executives of Amazon, Meta. Can you share what it takes to collaborate and make this partnership possible?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things I've learned that have been really interesting. One is that I think it definitely helps that I've been an engineer, I've been in Silicon Valley for a long time, and I'm not just like some intern. Hopefully it's clear that I've been doing it. I attained, some level of career success, and I think that really does help. I think the other thing too is to repeat again and again that you're in it for the long term. If you don't want to work with me today or tomorrow or next week, my hope is that I'm going to do Taro for 15 years. I want this to be like the thing that takes over my career. And so when you reinforce to people that, hey, I'll be here whenever you're ready to share your knowledge, I would love to give you a platform on which tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people can learn from you, please reach out. I'd love to help support you, right? So I think having that long-term relationship is something that I think has helped us grow a lot compared to a lot of other platforms that are very short-term focused.
What value you provide to the executives? Is it monetary or it's like...
Yeah, I think one thing that we've learned a lot is a lot of executives think about recruiting. Like if you're a VP or director, a big part of how you're judged is the impact of your team. Like how good are the people who you're bringing in and hiring on your team? And so if you can get more credibility, more brand by having a course on Taro, for example, I think that really does increase your response rate. So if I'm a VP at Amazon or a director and I'm trying to hire someone and they've heard my name before through Taro or through YouTube or something, as an engineer, I'm much more likely to reply to them. And so I think a big part of what we offer at Taro is we're going to try and make you like famous among the engineering community. I think part of it also is altruism. It's like, hey, these people have attained a lot of success in their career, and they just want to pass it on to people who are younger than them. Like what took them maybe 10, 20 years to figure out, could they distill it into 1 or 2 hours of time and make it much, much easier for the next generation to learn? So I think both of those are really powerful motivators.
And that's excellent to learn because, a lot of people think that US works on capitalism principles and, no one can do anything without money. That's like the principle that people use, like you cannot even ask someone to move your luggage without giving them tip. But like that breaks the principle that at the end of the day, it's about value creation. And if you can follow and bring something on the table with similar goals, you can actually bring a big impact and innovate together.
Yeah, and I think that's like in some ways the bedrock of Silicon Valley is this idea that I'm not sure how it's going to benefit me tomorrow or next week, but just by knowing you and if I could help you out in some way, maybe a year from now, you might know someone who could help me, or maybe 5 years from now, you could help me directly, right? There's this idea of the culture of I'm just going to trust you, and even if I don't see a direct benefit, I'll try and help you out, and then I think we've been the beneficiaries of that, and hopefully we can do the same thing for many people on Taro.
So a lot of people glorify starting up and they want to put the founder tag on their LinkedIn. What are the challenges of running a startup? What makes you think sometimes I wish I didn't start?
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that comes to mind is like the highs are higher and the lows are lower in a startup compared to big tech. And I had heard that expression before, but I think it's like very visceral when you're living it. I think
Visceral, sorry?
Visceral, like it's very, I feel it deeply.
Okay.
I think maybe it's bad to say, but like I'm addicted to the dashboard now. Like literally, I would say 10, 20 times a day, I am refreshing the Stripe dashboard that we have, and also we have a couple internal dashboards which track engagement and how many users are we having on a given day or given week. And my mood is directly correlated with if that number goes up or down. So I think that's kind of the bad thing, because like at Meta, it's such a huge company, and things take a little bit longer. And so you don't feel necessarily worried or stressed out about, okay, this number went down today or tomorrow. But at Meta, if things are going up or down, I either get really, really happy or I get really worried about the future based on that. So that's, I think, a very obvious difference or like anxiety, I would say, that comes with startup life.
And is it like more time consuming, of course? Like you have to
like a baby? I think it's weird. I mean, I think it is more time consuming on the whole, but I also think that a lot of the time it's like very like going back to what we said, I think a lot of the time is spent on like relationships or meetings that don't actually have a tangible benefit to the company or even to me in the short term, but they're just kind of learning or exploration, which might pan out down the road. Whereas at Meta, I think I had a much clearer idea of, hey, here is the OKR, here is the KPI I'm trying to move in 3 months, and almost all the work I did, I could draw a line between that and the KPI I was moving.
KPI? What is
key performance indicator, like the thing that I cared, the metric I was trying to move. But on Taro, I feel like a lot of the things we're so early on and we're still growing and learning a lot. I think a lot of what we're doing is much more kind of just like, let me put something out in the world which I think might have value, which might help people. I'm not sure how it'll benefit us directly, but we'll figure it out. So I think a lot of the time is like, I don't want to say wasted time, but it's like a lot of time of unknown compared to Meta.
Excellent. I think being altruistic is very important character of a founder. Like AI is the most spoken term in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like scared because of that term. I see so many things that I'm able to achieve with just AI. People don't pay anyone to translate language. A lot of jobs getting eliminated. And even developers, when they listen to rumors like Amazon, which leaked from AWS that they want to eliminate all software engineers in 2 years. And even OpenAI has a leak recently. They're working on a model which is $2,000 a month, and it's going to help you replace your software engineers, which is a B2B product. Mm-hmm. So what do you see these predictions inclining towards?
Yeah, well, I think that maybe my own bias as a software engineer, but I really doubt that software engineers will be replaced anytime soon. I think what might happen is parts of the job might be taken over by AI. I actually am quite confident that'll happen. But I think this idea of like, oh, we're going to replace the engineer is more of like a PR tactic rather than an actual reality. I do think like the way we interact with computers is also going to change a lot in the next 5 or 10 years. It's kind of like what we talked about before. DSA, like leak code problems, will I think become less important as a measure of engineers' quality, because AI will just do a much better job, way faster and bug-free compared to what me or you could do. So why would I ask you about that when I could obviously trust AI? So I think the type of work that I'm going to ask you to do and the way I evaluate you is going to change. So I think like the engineering job, I think, will always exist in some way. The way in which you do the job, like how you have impact, it might shift away from like writing for loops and like doing more on like how do I decompose the problem, how do I talk to the computer. But I'm very confident that in the next 5 to 10 years, engineers are going to have tons of opportunities. And in fact, the job of engineer will become even more important because they'll be the ones to leverage AI for all the other industries out there.
Excellent. And since you have, you've been a staff engineer at Meta, what decisions, and you have worked in startups, you have pivoted so many times, what decisions you think you would rethink and change in the past if you had to? Because you mentioned in your podcast last that, when you were given an offer at WhatsApp, if you had went to WhatsApp, your net worth could have an extra zero in it.
Yep.
So what decision you would think you would, change?
Oh, and I mean, I think there's like tons and tons of things like that. Like I remember the founder of DoorDash, Andy Fang. Andy, if you're watching this, we can still talk. But like he emailed me in 2012 or 2013. Like I knew him from Stanford, right? And he said, "Hey Rahul, I'm doing this thing called Palo Alto Delivery. We just started out. Do you want to join?" I'm like, that doesn't seem that interesting, right? So if I had joined DoorDash, that would have been probably the biggest outcome. Like there's like when I graduated Stanford in 2013, there was like probably 10, 15 companies I could have joined that financially would have made me much better off. So that's like the kind of tongue-in-cheek answer. I think that, I don't feel that bad about it though. Like obviously there are, in Silicon Valley, there are new millionaires or billionaires being created every year. So you can't feel that bad about missing a big unicorn. I think that, all things considered, I feel so lucky every day just to have gone to where I am, being here, doing Taro. Like, yeah, I might have missed out on some big opportunities, but I'm really, really privileged and happy to be where I am. So to answer your question directly, like the honest answer of what I would do differently is I think that in the first few years of my career, I was much more focused on learning in isolation. Like I did tutorials online, I read books alone. I didn't really have that drive or desire to talk to other engineers. And I feel like for me, and I think for almost everyone in the world, learning is social. Like you learn so much better, you learn so much more deeply when you're engaging on a topic with someone smart. So I would just encourage everyone, try and find a peer group, try and find people who you respect and spend time with them.
Wonderful advice. I think innovation has only been possible when you work together in person. What are the goals you have currently, and any final advice for people?
Yeah, I think the number one goal, at least on the company side, is trying to make Taro a really amazing place to help any kind of engineer, any kind of technical person grow their career. And I want to do it, like I said, for decades more. And so if people here have advice or feedback on like what could be valuable for them, what kind of content or what kind of problems you have, I would love to learn and try and make Taro really work. And then I think a big part of how I think about Taro is just building trust with people, like just trying to help people, putting out high value content on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever people are. And if people have feedback about that too, I'd love to engage and try and help people.
Thank you so much. Any final words for students who want to have a career like you?
No, I think main thing is just find people who you can learn from. Use Taro. Reach out to me, and I'm on YouTube and LinkedIn primarily are the two biggest platforms that I care about. So I'm really eager to help, and I feel like I've been the beneficiary of so many people helping me. I'd love to pay it forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rahul. It was wonderful talking to you. I learned a lot. I hope people go out and check out Taro, please. Thank you.
Thanks.